This is America, where the U.S. president says his military strikes have killed so many senior Iranian leaders that the U.S. doesn't know who's left to deal with. So how's that now complicating negotiations with the U.S.? I'll be back with more on that later, but first, here's Cyril Vanier in our Washington studio.
Heidi Zhou Castro, thank you very much. 7 weeks after the U.S. and Israel launched a war against Iran, the Iranian establishment has not collapsed and appears to believe that it can still shape the terms of negotiation with the United States. While some voices in Iran are engaging in talks, a new generation of Revolutionary Guard is driving a harder bargain, ready to maximize economic hurt on the global economy by threatening maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. So did the U.S. get caught out and underestimate the conflicting points of power in Iran? Well, Donald Trump says that he has Iran right where he wants them. Here's the U.S. president talking to CNBC.
That we're going to end up with a great deal. I think they have no choice. We've taken out their Navy. We've taken out their Air Force. It is regime change, no matter what you want to call it. Iran can get themselves on a very good footing if they make a deal. They can make themselves into a strong nation again, a wonderful nation again. We've totally won the war. You know, if you read the New York Times, you think, oh, gee, when are we surrendering? We have totally beat them.
But despite that, questions remain as to whether Donald Trump's team is talking to the right people in Iran.
Now you have the IRGC practically becoming the state. You're talking about an IRGC that is now almost in control of governance. They make the final decision. And that's even more dangerous.
Almost every one of us voted to designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. Those votes, they didn't just happen for no reason.
We have no way to control what comes next, which most experts believe would be the Iranian Revolutionary Guard-led government rising up and being just as repressive and antagonistic as the current theocracy, and perhaps even more committed to the acquisition of nuclear weapons.
And both sides, the United States and Iran, have advertised their red lines, their non-negotiables. But who decides if a deal is reached? Here in the U.S., there is little doubt that that decision ultimately rests with the president. In Iran, though, there are multiple voices delivering sometimes mixed signals. Here's Phil Lavelle.
There is a standoff in the Strait of Hormuz. One day it's open, next it's closed.
You will return to your previous port of call in Iran.
And now the US blocking it, firing on and seizing Iranian-flagged vessels trying to get through. Iran calls it armed piracy and theft, chaos on a critical waterway, and a chokehold on a huge chunk of the world's oil supply. Here is where we were, war, and here is where we are now, ceasefire, and here is where America wants to be, and quickly, a deal. But it's that final stretch, that final push, getting to a deal that is proving to be quite the challenge.
We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
But who exactly are the Americans negotiating with? Well, we hear the words Iranian regime quite a lot, and President Trump says there are new figures in charge.
It's a regime change. They are much more, I think, frankly, more intelligent and more moderate.
But who is making the decisions? Who is he referring to? Is it the new supreme leader who took over after his father was killed in the opening days of the war? Mojtaba Khamenei hasn't been seen in person since, just occasional messages online, leading to questions over who really is in control. Is it the diplomats? They are the ones issuing the public statements after all. The likes of the foreign minister and the president, the public faces, even doing the rounds on US and international media.
All of this is America's fault. We did not start this war. We are only defending ourselves.
Or is it the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's internal, much-feared security force? It was the IRGC that said on Saturday the strait would remain closed, just hours after the foreign minister said it would be reopened. And the question is, what next for President Trump, who appears to be caught between two competing narratives? Remember too, this is about more than the Strait. Iran's nuclear ambitions are a big part of it. It's been enriching uranium, it says, for peaceful means. President Trump pulled out of the original nuclear deal in his first term.
We have terminated a terrible, terrible deal that should have never, ever been made.
But that took the previous administration 18 months to reach, and that was during peacetime. The current one is trying to reach a solution in a matter of days and in the midst of an active conflict. Will more talks actually happen? If so, they'll be in Islamabad. But it is here, 11,000 kilometers away, that the ultimate decision of what America does next will be made by one man. As for how Iran responds, or who decides on Iran's response, well, that is a whole other question. Phil Lavelle, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And Al Jazeera's Mike Hanna is live at the White House. So, Mike, does the White House at this point still feel that it has the upper hand in negotiations?
Well, President Trump certainly does believe he has the upper hand in negotiations. He said so repeatedly. He stated again and again that the U.S. has already won the war. He insists that the nuclear dust, as he puts it, which is the reactive chemical, the nuclear munitions that the Iranians have for peaceful purposes, they say, he says that has all been destroyed by the bombers. But at the same time, he insists that he will continue with this war, even though he says he has already won it. But as to what the White House thinks, people within the White House, well, that's very difficult because they refer everything to what the president thinks. One very brief example, in the course of the day, we've been trying to ascertain exactly what time this ceasefire ends. The president himself has given 4 different timings for when it should end. The White House are telling us all the time, just follow the words of the president. Well, we follow the words of the president, but then it's very difficult to find out exactly which words to follow, exactly what time he has specified for the ceasefire to end.
Al Jazeera's Mike Hanna live from the White House. Thank you very much, Mike. Now, Heidi Zhou Castro is back with us and takes a look at what the U.S. media has been saying about the current state of this conflict.
Cyril, the American media briefly celebrated when the Iranian foreign minister announced last week the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. But that quickly changed when the Revolutionary Guard shot at tankers and said the strait was back closed. So how was that received by Trump's inner circle? Well, the news site Axios captured the surprise of a senior administration official who's quoted as saying, "We thought they," that's the U.S. deal team, "were negotiating with the right people. But what happened is the Iranian team went back and the IRGC and those kinds of people said, oh, no, you don't speak for us." Another U.S. official said, "We aren't sure who's in charge, and neither do they." Yes, that is confusing and complicating the latest talks as the conflict over Hormuz threatens to escalate. The Washington Post said those talks are on shaky footing after U.S. seizure of ship in Strait of Hormuz. And National Public Radio put it simply, peace talks are in doubt. So what does Trump think now? Well, he told the New York Post that he will not be rushed to end the Iran war, and he lashed out at Democrats and Republicans for urging him to settle. As a negotiator, and I'm a great negotiator, he's quoted as fuming to the paper, how bad is it when you have people from your own country trying to reach a deal? They are helping the other side. The other side has nothing, they have no cards, but they are using this to delay. And delay is not good for Trump, as gas prices tick higher and his approval ratings at home tick lower. For now, let's go back to you, Cyril.
So let's take a quick look at what makes this current moment, this window for negotiation, different from the talks in 2015 that delivered a deal with Iran ultimately. The main point of the JCPOA, as the deal is known, was to significantly restrict Iran's uranium enrichment and nuclear capacity. In return, Tehran got gradual sanctions relief. That agreement took about 20 months and several rounds of talks before it was signed. Now, both sides are aiming for a deal within days in the middle of a war. And this time, it's not just about the nuclear issue. The Strait of Hormuz, compensation for war damages, and a permanent end to the conflict, all of those things are on the agenda. The U.S. has also moved away from what was a State Department-led model to a team much closer to the White House, while Iran is made up of career diplomats, politicians, and subject matter experts. That's the delegation that they sent to Islamabad. Well, the stakes are higher, too. In 2015, failure to comply would have resulted in economic sanctions. Now, the alternative to a deal could be the resumption of the war and the bombing of infrastructure really across the region. Over the weekend, there appeared to be a breakthrough. Donald Trump announced that the Strait of Hormuz was completely open, and Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, agreed. Suddenly, there seemed to be alignment on a major issue. But then within hours, Iran's Revolutionary Guard opened fire on a commercial tanker, suggesting that there might be significant divisions within Iran. Here's Alex Baird.
For questions stateside, who are we actually talking to in Iran? This was allegedly broadcast to ships in the Strait of Hormuz by the IRGC and has been fueling that debate online.
We will open it by the order of our leader, Imam Khamenei, not by the tweets of some idiot.
The interpretation online is that the idiot being referred to is the Iranian foreign minister, but again, the key word, allegedly. That's led some in the US to say there are now two Irans. National security analyst Alex Plitzer says the IRGC are blocking civilian leadership from reaching a deal. And the understanding in Washington is they are poised to seize power. The IRGC pumping out videos like this.
Shut up, Yankee.
With an increasingly hardline edge. Recent analysis from the Institute of War now at the center of the debate that within Iran there is now a major power struggle. Civilians trying to talk peace, and the IRGC saber-rattling and tightening control. Classic regime chaos. Many voices in the US now saying, if that's the case, is there even any point in those talks?
They have to be shown that they can't win, and we have to break their will.
Right-leaning journalist Eric Doherty believes the writing is on the wall, that Trump's finger is on the trigger and he's ready to pull. Bill Mitchell, confident that the president is in complete control and that no matter who is in control in Iran, they can take the deal or face the consequences.
Let's bring in our panel now. Former U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain, William Roebuck, joins us in the studio. We're also joined by a former U.S. policy planner at the State Department, John Alterman. Thank you very much to both of you for being with us. Ambassador, on the back of these reports and the fact that we saw one thing from the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, who was in favor of opening the Strait of Hormuz, announced it to be open on the Iranian side, and hours later, the IRGC did something different. They opened fire on commercial ships. So one side saying open, the other side shut it down. Is the U.S. negotiating team even talking to the right people?
It's a good question, Cyril. I think there are some fractures in the Iranian regime, but my sense, looking at it and talking to analysts who know that regime very closely, is that those fractures have not been significant in terms of hurting their command and control or hurting the overall posture in the negotiations. I think it's still, it's a bit amazing, but after all the attack that has been done on the regime and on the country of Iran, I think that regime still is relatively cohesive. Yes, some fracturing, but I would say overall that they are still operating with a fairly significant degree of command and control and cohesiveness in terms of a diplomatic position.
John Alterman?
And this issue of moderates in Iran versus conservatives in Iran is something that goes back decades and decades. There has always been this element in Iran of infighting. What's different now is it's not really clear there's an arbiter. Ayatollah Khamenei was an arbiter. The previous Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the father, was able to be decisive in these, and sometimes he chose the more moderate course, and sometimes he chose the course of resistance. With his son, it's not clear he's alive. It's not clear if he's disabled. It's not clear he's in control. It's not clear he has the support of anybody. The role of an arbiter is different. It seems to me the infighting is normal. What's different is we're not sure how the infighting can or will be resolved. Although the division has been present since the early days of the Islamic Revolution, 1979.
Well, you say that it's not clear that the supreme leader's alive. Sorry, that was floated by senior Trump administration officials in the early days of the war, but even the defense secretary seems to have walked away from that now, saying he might be severely wounded, severely disfigured. He's no longer speculating that Mujtaba Khamenei might actually be dead. However, it is the case that the U.S. president, early in this bombing campaign, has said that the U.S. had killed, in fact, so many Iranian leaders that the U.S. might be left without interlocutors. Listen to this.
Their leaders are all gone. The next set of leaders are all gone. And the next set of leaders are mostly gone. And now nobody wants to be a leader over there anymore. We're having a hard time. We want to talk to them, and there's nobody to talk to.
So, Ambassador, what do you think of that? Is it possible, is it the case that the U.S. may have actually killed people that they actually wanted to talk to?
Well, there's been significant regime decapitation, as they say. Clearly, they killed significant ranks of top leaders. I think they probably did kill a few people who could have been useful in these negotiations, but that has happened. It is what it is. My sense is that they have a regime that is built on redundancy, and they have been able to replace next man standing. They have put people in positions, and they have managed to carry on. The amazing thing to me so far, although the fighting is at a ceasefire right now, but for 6 weeks, even with all that decapitation, they were able to respond in the moment and in retaliation in ways that were measured and were very specific to what they had received in terms of a military thrust. So I think they have managed to replace leadership and to keep going.
John Alterman, there was a line in Axios reporting that was attributed to a senior U.S. official whom, when they saw the IRGC opening fire on commercial tankers just after the Iranian foreign minister had said the Strait of Hormuz is open, they said, oh, it looks like the people the way this was interpreted by U.S. officials was the people we are talking to are actually being then undermined by the IRGC. Do you feel right now there is continuity in the negotiations, in the talks, communications between the U.S. and Iran?
I think there is. I think every government, including the U.S. government that I'm familiar with, you talk to negotiators. The negotiators are trying to represent the government. Sometimes they lie. Sometimes they don't know what's happening. I think that there's always a sort of distance between the people who are doing the diplomacy and the people who are making the statecraft decisions at home. Again, I think that the difference...
So this is not particularly unusual?
I don't think it's totally unusual. I think that the difference is it is not at all clear to me who is actually calling the shots. That's a little different for Iran, although the confusion about who's calling the shots is fairly customary in Iran.
So as the U.S. and Iran both weigh their options right now within this window that allows for some diplomacy, one thing they both have in common is that they do not trust each other. Both sides expect that they're going to be either lied to or bombed or otherwise deceived or manipulated. Here's Al Jazeera's Manuel Rapallo.
Iran agreed to restrict its uranium enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief in 2015 under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. In 2018, Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. from the deal, and last year, widespread sanctions were reimposed on Iran. The two countries later entered indirect talks with hopes of reviving that agreement. But after 5 rounds of negotiations, Israel and then the U.S. carried out strikes targeting military and nuclear infrastructure, and Iran retaliated. Indirect talks resumed again earlier this year, with Oman as mediator. On February 27th, Oman's foreign minister said a deal was, quote, within reach. The next day, the U.S. and Israel launched their assault on Iran. So the Iranians may have good reason to not trust the U.S. going into these negotiations, but so does the U.S. In 1995 and 1996, Iran secretly began pursuing nuclear technology, signing agreements with China and Russia to work on previously decommissioned nuclear facilities. In 2002, 2 secret nuclear sites in Natanz and Iraq were revealed, leading the U.S. to accuse Tehran of attempting to build nuclear weapons. Now, as we mentioned, in 2015, Iran agreed to restrict its uranium enrichment. In 2019, Iran began enriching uranium to well above the 3.67% limit of the JCPOA. By 2021, the country was enriching uranium to 60% purity, a major step closer to reaching the 90% threshold for weapons-grade uranium. There's also Iran's support for its regional allies, especially over the past few years. In 2023, the Houthis, who are backed by Iran, launched hundreds of missiles and drones and merchant ships in the Red Sea. In 2024, the Houthis directly attacked a U.S.-owned and operated ship. And on March 2nd, most recently, Hezbollah joined the war on Iran's behalf, exchanging attacks with U.S. ally Israel.
That's Manuel Rapallo. John Alterman, you wanted to address this trust gap, trust deficit.
I spoke to Wendy Sherman, who was one of the negotiators of the JCPOA, shortly after, and I asked about this issue of trust with the Iranians. And I was surprised she was very dismissive you even needed trust. Her point was you need an agreement that is clear, that is verifiable, that takes the place of trust, because I got the sense that she didn't even think trust was going to be on the table. I'm not sure there's trust, but I'm not sure there's ever been trust, and certainly after the conduct both ways. Trust is not what we need here. We need an agreement that gives us a path forward to resolve some of these issues.
Yeah, so it's not actually a factor, not needed, and in fact the negotiations, you could argue, are taking place because there is no trust. Ambassador?
I think so. I think in a negotiation like this, what you need is a fairly precise calculation of interests on each side, and some sense by each side that they have some leverage and some stake in the game, that there can be an agreement and that it will be enforced and people can move forward from there.
And a verification mechanism both ways.
Right. So if both sides want to establish leverage and really shape the negotiating space for the other side, or rather constrain the negotiating space for the other side, my question is, in the last 7 weeks, has Donald Trump's strategy worked? There's been bombing, now there's an economic blockade, right, with the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. So there's been kinetic action and now economic action. Has it worked to constrain Iran and shape their negotiating environment?
I think, Bill's point is exactly right, that you need to sort of shape what your adversary can do. It seems to me that in this case, each side thinks that time is on its side. The Iranians think that they can take pain for longer than the United States. The United States thinks we can inflict lots of pain and we can inflict more. And it feels to me like where we are now is each side trying to capitalize on the fact that it has more time than the other. That ultimately turns into a game of chicken. And as we know with games of chicken, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
Ambassador Roebuck, we've watched Donald Trump want to set the stage for negotiations that would be favorable to the U.S. in multiple different arenas and different settings, right? He's done it with tariffs. He's done it in different ways. Do you think it is working in this arena against Iran?
His techniques are working. I mean, his use of threatening language, for example. I think the blockade was a very savvy move to put additional pressure on Iran and to take away their positive use of the Strait of Hormuz. I think the problem he's facing is that there's a part, I think, of his psychology. I'm not sure he wants a deal. I think he's not predisposed to reach some sort of diplomatic agreement with the Iranian side, and it's creating, I think,
what makes you say that?
I just feel like he is, based on his previous history, 10 years of railing against the JCPOA, railing against the efforts of President Obama, former President Carter, I think he has locked himself into a stance that the only good agreement with the Iranian side is essentially a capitulation, that we give them terms and they accept them.
Is that still on the table at this point, capitulation? 7 weeks.
I think
There's
it's
no
what the
sign,
president
right?
still wants. I think the president is determined to make the Iranians cry uncle.
But there's no sign that it's coming. From the outside looking in, and granted, we are not in those rooms. We don't know how close or how far they are from their goal, right? But from the outside looking in, there isn't a sign, zero, that capitulation might be on the way or around the corner.
Except the president's language demanding it. And I think the president still thinks that with American firepower, targeting intelligence, the ability to block the strait, all those things, that he can make them collapse or fear collapse and give him what he wants. I think what, Bill's years of diplomacy are all about how do you help the other side save face? How do you make it easier to accept? The president's not interested in making it easier to accept. He's interested in showing how he dominated a weaker party. And that desire to come away showing he dominated, rather than come away with an agreement that lets you build toward resolving the issue further down the road, I think may be something that leads us toward more violence rather than a near-term agreement, whether in the long term it leads us to a better agreement or some sort of collapse or something else. That's, I think, the president's bet, but I'm not sure, where other parties are on this.
So we wanted to ask Americans what they want, since this is being conducted, this war and the ceasefire and the negotiation on their behalf. Here's Al Jazeera's Heidi Zhou Castro.
We're lucky to get visitors from all over the country to Washington, Cyril, as this gives us the opportunity to talk to people from all sorts of places. And today, I asked them if they have hope for these negotiations with Iran.
I just really have hope in that nothing bad keeps going on to the soldiers that are being deployed there. Whatever it is that's happening over there, whatever negotiation, I don't think it's worth risking the lives of many soldiers.
Do you have hope for negotiations right now between the U.S. and Iran?
Not particularly.
Why is that?
Because I don't think the people that are negotiating have the skills to negotiate.
On the U.S. side or Iran side?
On the U.S. side, I have no idea about the Iran side.
Do you think it was a mistake or good policy for Trump to have then withdrawn the U.S. from the Iranian nuclear deal?
It was a very bad idea. Withdrawing was stupid.
How so?
Well, I mean, everything I've read and everything I've heard is that it was working. They were being very closely monitored and it was working. So, that's what keeps happening. All the things that are working are getting broken.
And there we have it, the opinions of some American voices on these negotiations. Cyril?
Now, Heidi, thank you very much. Ambassador Roebuck, well, both of you, I should say, have been involved in diplomacy. I'm interested in hearing from both of you on how these kinds of moments play out behind closed doors. And Ambassador Roebuck, I'm mindful of the fact that you've done boots on the ground diplomacy. If I'm not mistaken, you were embedded with U.S. forces in northeastern Syria, but on the diplomatic front of what they were doing. So what happens in a moment like this behind closed doors?
Well, to be honest, the visibility we have in this negotiation is not good at all. I gather from what I've read that they exchange positions. They spend a lot of time, sort of examining each other's positions. But I'm not at all clear how much progress they made actually on the previous round of negotiations. The Iranians seem to think they made a lot of progress. The American side, led by Vice President Vance, was dismissive, and at least publicly. Again, there's so much spin from each side about what happened inside a room which don't have visibility on. It's difficult to know precisely what went on, but it seemed like the gaps were fairly significant. They made progress, but they didn't close it. And it's not surprising in one round of negotiations.
John Alterman, real quick, go ahead.
No, and there's a real disjuncture here, because the U.S. is a much more powerful country, and certainly even more powerful after these military actions. But for the Iranians, this is existential. They've been preparing for 50 years. They have the same negotiating team that's been negotiating for decades. They know all our moves. This is the most important issue for them. And I think that disparity between us and them, President bets it works for them, the Iranians are betting it works for them.
John Alterman, Ambassador William Roebuck, thank you very much to both of you for joining the program today. That's it from us here in Washington, D.C. And on This Is America, we will keep following the decisions that shape the U.S. and influence the rest of the world. Thank you for joining us. Back to Al Jazeera headquarters in Doha.